Whilst creating the new PlayStation 2 title, Ghosthunter, a team of games developers stumbled on what appeared at first to be a series of strange coincidences. Not only did locations created in the game exist for real, many of the legends and myths surrounding these places mirrored those in the game with eerie accuracy. Intrigued, members of the PlayStation team decided to visit the areas which so closely echoed their own work. To help them research the histories of these so-called haunted places, two experts in the field of the supernatural were enlisted: Kalila Smith, parapsychologist, and Billy Roberts, world-renowned psychic. The old plantation house in New Orleans has played witness to countless dramas in its 200-year history. The property is said to host the spirits of several long-dead inhabitants. Of greatest interest to the team were reported sightings of a sinister child, identical to Jessie Planter, the ghostly girl imprisoned in the De Montfort mansion in Ghosthunter. As the team arrived, would the ghoulish infant come out and play?
I find that most paranormal experience or activity in old houses is due to a sort of a build-up of energy which creates a photographic image. However, in this house, I've experienced something completely different. I particularly felt something in this corner, as though there might have been a crib or a cot of some kind.
Actually, I got some readings over here on the electromagnetic meter, particularly like right in this area right here.
That's quite significant, isn't it?
It is, actually, and there's a little bit of a drop in temperature as well. The major drop in temperature is in the room adjacent to this one.
But what about down here? Because there seems to be nothing at all.
Nothing. It seems to be right in this particular vicinity, right in here. And that's also, see it high, it drops as soon as it comes near where the meter's getting the most reading.
I mean, I do feel slightly nauseous at the moment.
Do you?
Yeah. So I think that's quite significant.
It's right in here, just right in this area right here.
Yeah, and the other thing is, anybody who sleeps in this room, I'm sure that they would have their dreams invaded by whatever's present in the room.
You would think?
I think so. It'd be interesting to see what goes on in the next room, because there's a strange feeling as you walk towards the door.
Right, let's check it out.
Okay, let's have a look.
Okay.
You know what there is in this room? An ectoplasmic mist.
When the team began to test for spiritual energy in the main bedroom, everything, including the filming equipment, appeared to be affected by the strange atmosphere. Batteries drained despite being fully charged, and microphones began to fail.
Well, she's draining my battery down.
Can we just hold up a sec? Billy, is your mic still plugged in? Someone picking it up, Billy is.
To add to the sense of unease, the team captured an unexplained reflection in the bedroom's large mirror.
It's like a spot of light in the mirror that keeps appearing.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, that would be brilliant.
It's an orb?
Who's that?
Yeah.
Who's this?
Even when the power was switched off, the light continued flickering for several minutes before disappearing. Billy Roberts was in no doubt. This activity was the work of a ghostly child.
She seems to be not malevolent, but sort of mischievous, and I think that she died a very nasty death.
Whatever resided in the plantation house, it didn't want a filming crew present. That much was clear. From the outset, cameras failed, and equipment closed down for no reason. The PlayStation team decided to leave the little girl to play in peace. The USS Seeker was a location which shared many similarities with the sunken HMS Victoria in Ghosthunter. In the game, the blast of ghostly gunfire resounds as the supernatural soldiers play out their never-ending battle beyond death. The USS Seeker was a battleship used during World War II. After being sunk in a devastating battle which saw most of its crew killed, she was sold and is now used as a museum piece. What nobody expected was that members of the ill-fated crew of 1940 would continue to protect and serve. The Ghosthunter team went aboard.
As soon as we came into the parking lot and I looked at the ship, I immediately started feeling almost a disorientation and dizziness somewhat. And when I entered the ship, I started feeling as if I had motion sickness, as if the ship was actually bobbing in the sea, even though it is landlocked.
I feel very agitated around this area, and I'm, very, very certain. I know people would say it's obvious, but quite a few people died in this area.
I feel a lot of anxiety, a lot of anxious feeling, a lot of high adrenaline.
For me personally, it was like stepping through some kind of a time barrier.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And watching a replay of the events.
I felt not only the emotions, but I started getting like a flashing, almost as if I was watching a movie in slow motion of what was actually happening on the ship during a war. There were men running around yelling, guns going off, the larger cannon-like guns shooting off into the air, airplanes coming over, exploding.
I get the impression, I very briefly glimpsed an officer standing up there.
I got that too.
Shaking his hand, pointing down at somebody as though he was angry in some way. And that's a sort of an an image from the past. So there is a lot of anger as well, isn't it?
There's a lot of anger, anxiety, frustration, and it's almost as if the ship itself has a pulse to it.
That's it, a living personality all of its own.
It's as if the ship has taken on that paranormal energy and the ship itself is alive and breathing.
There is a bit of agitation which I feel is probably from the people who were actually killed, whose lives were terminated. So, I mean, there's a lot of energy around here, isn't there?
There's a great deal of energy. And it's mixed emotions, and it's when the emotions are filtering through me, they're not my emotions, they're not all emotions that I can even distinguish because I've never felt anything quite like this in any other place before. I saw an apparition of a young man, maybe 18, 19 years old. He looked to be about 5'9", very small build, but very, very fair, very blonde, blue-eyed, and very cheery, and he was running up the stairs. And I got the same energy from this same young man right around one of the guns. And I'm getting a vision of someone being shot at that gun that you were talking about, yeah. And then another man literally just pushing his body off and taking over the gun. I got a lot of almost like past life regressions in here, where I was actually pushed into that time frame and seeing what was going on during the war. It's almost as if the boat itself pretty much pulls you into that era and reveals some of its history to you.
During the USS Seeker shoot, members of the crew heard footsteps along empty corridors, and shadows appeared where there was no one standing. Watching the tapes back later, it was evident that whilst the ship may have appeared empty, it was actually full of spiritual activity. Perilous and isolated, the Oakville swamplands provide one of the creepiest locations in Ghosthunter. The swamps are terrorized by a deadly phantom, the mutated spirit of rich landowner David de Montfort, fused for eternity with the alligator that tore away his life. Naturally, no real-world destination could be as terrifying as that nightmarish landscape. Or could it? Our team of ghost hunters were about to find out. As soon as the PlayStation filming crew set foot in the Blackland swamp, they all felt uneasy. Along with alligators and snakes, it seemed they weren't alone, and nobody wanted to linger.
What are you picking up here?
Well, I get the impression there's a lot more buried here than what I can see.
There are.
Sounds a silly question, but did somebody actually live here as well?
Yes,
somebody,
they did.
Because there's quite a lot of activity, I think, in a paranormal sense, and it's quite powerful.
This was actually a town.
Oh, was
This was the town of Frenier. This entire area out here in the swamp. It was a cabbage farming community. German settlers had settled the area. And one of the residents out here was a voodoo woman by the name of Julia Brown. And she was somewhat eccentric. She would sit on her front porch and sing songs, and she would always sing, "When I die, I'm going to take the whole town with me." Now, Julia Brown did eventually pass away, and mourners came from hundreds of miles away to go to this woman's funeral. It was the day that the hurricane of 1915 hit into the Pontchartrain Lake with 100-mile-an-hour winds that swept through the town of Frenier, knocking mourners, the casket, everywhere into the swamp. And then a 30-foot tidal surge literally swallowed up the whole town.
Wow. So that's
And the Army Corps of Engineers came in, and there were no building materials. There was no town left, so they literally had to bury the entire town in a mass grave right here. Families, children, women.
There's quite an elderly woman that died as well. I felt it before, and she kept talking about Martha. And Martha seems to be, and that's not a German name, I don't think, is it? But she kept talking about Martha, so Martha's connected in some way to this.
Martha, yes.
You understand that?
I think that that's possible that the little girl that survived was Martha, because there was 2 survivors in the town of Frenier. An elderly black man grabbed a little girl and got inside one of the railroad boxcars, and he held on as the winds whipped through, and he held on to that little girl and he saved her. He eventually died. She grew up to marry and have family, and her family is still plagued by the ghost of Julia Brown.
Still today?
Still going after the last of the living from the town of Frenier.
Both Kalila and Billy claimed they felt the presence of spirits on the land housing the unmarked graves. For the rest of the team, they just knew it was a place they never wanted to return to again.
Last of the living from the town of Guerrilla.
At the end of their investigation, the ghost hunting team were still no closer to explaining the similarities between these real haunted places and locations featured in the new PlayStation game. It's a mystery, which continues to this very day.